dive into the session. So, Jazz, you were just 13 years old when you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, being a teenager. How did you process that big of an information? And like, were you able to understand the intensity of the condition or not?
You know, you're the first person I think who's asked me that question. And I think it's very important that it comes to light because when we're young, when we're very young, we don't know what's happening to us. Like when we're like 2, 3 years old. But when we are 13 or 14 and we have certain idea about our surroundings, we have a certain idea about our life, about our practice, and then something so traumatic happens to you, your worldview does shift. At 13, however, for me, healthcare was always that if you go to a hospital, you get treated and you come out. So that understanding of permanence did not exist at 13. So I remember still that when my doctor on the last day sat down with me and said that, listen, this is going to be a lifelong condition, I sort of broke down. Again, even after 13, I think, chalo, that was one of the diagnosis bits. But as I was growing through my adolescence, as I was during my entire high school days, I would not understand the consequence of uncontrolled sugars. Because as a child, you are undefeatable. You know, you feel like you're on top of the world. You don't understand that with so much fluctuation, there is potential consequence also. And I think a lot of our teenagers face that because we try to, even like today, so today I'm on the flip side of the coin where I am educating other kids or I am educating other teenagers, but consequence is not a concept that we are familiar with as kids. So definitely while growing up, I did not understand the severity of it, nor did I understand the permanence of it. All I understood was what was happening to me in the moment. And what was happening to me in the moment was still very, very hard. But it only struck when I became a little older that, listen, no, this is something I have to do forever. This is something that is not going to change. This is something I have to control. And that got better with time as you grow older.
No, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And when we talk about teenagers per se, or children, we often see this attitude comes. Yes, there is a perception that why me? Why God chose me to, give
Your
me this
voice is
problem.
muted, Meher. I
Yeah, just pick up my mic. Is it better this
much.
way? Okay. So my question was that when we talk about teenagers or children per se, so this perception comes in that why God chose me for this problem, or why is this just happening with me? So we often think of why me. Can you share some personal experiences or challenges that you faced as a teenager, and how were you able to overcome them?
So I think I'll just correct you over there. I don't think it's just children. I think anybody at any age gets this kind of a diagnosis. The first thought is why me? And I think I also had that when I was growing up. And the why me didn't stay for too long, I think, because of my parents. I think my parents at that age molded me to think that it's okay, you've done nothing wrong. It happens to anybody. They, I think, tried to explain to me the science of what an autoimmune condition is in a way I could understand. And they sort of gave me no reason to think why me. Of course, they empathized very deeply. They were with me at 3 in the morning when I had to check my sugar or inject. So I owe it a lot to my parents, my mother specifically, to get me out of that why me. I'm sure she had a why Jazz, which was a little stronger than the why me I had. But I'll tell you again, as kids, I think older people get that why me more than kids do. Because as kids, we don't know. Like I said, we don't understand how this has shifted our entire life. We're still very naive. The parents get that why me more. Why my child? Have I done something wrong? So I would say my mother definitely was the reason I could get over it. And as a 13-year-old, also that why me was not as big as it is when you are aware enough or cognizant enough to understand the severity of the condition.
Right, absolutely. And this also when you like start growing up, you have this positive mind shifts coming in that you get some some positive vibes, you start inculcating positive habits, you make up your mind that you have to live with this condition and you have to mold yourself in a way. So do you have any advice for teenagers, with type 1 diabetes or with diabetes, on maintaining a positive outlook from the starting? Like, how can they, start inculcating that positive, healthy mindset that, in along with managing their condition well?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think one thing though that I will say, firstly, for all the people with type 1 or their parents, I think it's important to realize that, like I said, it's not your fault why this happened. It happened because it was meant to happen, right? So I keep saying it's not your fault, but it is not responsibility. And health is always going to be our responsibility as individuals. I keep telling all my kids that, it's not it might be a bad day with all the sugar fluctuations and this and that, but it's not a bad life. And I think the more we try to normalize this condition, that okay, so I'll give you a personal example that I used to dance professionally while growing up. And I thought post diabetes that I would not be able to dance anymore. I thought that things will, change. And I think over the course of me growing up, I realized that things were different, but nothing changed. I would still go for an 8-hour rehearsal as I would have gone earlier. What was different now is that, okay, I would check my sugar 2 times in the middle, or I would carry some snack and things like that. So the more we normalize it, the more we talk about it without stigma, there is a positivity attached to it. However, I will say that we do not, I think it's very important not to get into that toxic positivity mind that, oh my God, no, you have to be strong, you have to be strong. And that's what happened to me. And it actually did the opposite of what it was supposed to do. I think as parents and as caregivers, it's very important to tell your kids that they are strong, but also allow them to be vulnerable. And I think because as a 13-year-old, I internalized that I was very strong. Everyone around me with very good intention were telling me that, Jazz, you're so strong. You take injections a day, you're strong, you're a warrior, you're a fighter, this, that. So I took it upon myself that I can't be weak now. So that's what I think, that toxic positivity we should never do with our kids. Allow them to be weak at times, because it is a bloody difficult condition to live with, right? So if you just keep telling your child they're strong, even when they want to be weak, when they want to ask for help, they will sort of create this facade. And that's what happened with me, out of no fault of anyone around me, because देखो intention सबके सही होते हैं कि यार हमको बढ़ावा देना है, हमको motivation देना है. When that turns into you are not allowed to be weak, that becomes a problem. And then that burst, like at around 16 or 17, I really broke down saying, listen, I don't want to be strong, you know? So I think it's about having an organic journey where you are in parts strong, in parts you're going to break down. But that's the journey which will actually give you true strength.
And that is, such a strong statement to, like pass on also.
Yeah,
That, you just don't, you have to be strong, but you can be vulnerable also. That is a very good, mindset and perception to look at. Even if you have diabetes, if you don't have diabetes, and generally also,
absolutely.
it's a very good mindset to have. Absolutely. Very nice, tip. So, before we continue further, this is for everybody who is, joining in and are new to the channel. First of all, THIP welcomes you, and we have a really amazing community on diabetes, and where you can meet like-minded people, where you can discuss your problems. If you have any questions, you can connect with speakers, and speakers like Jazz herself. So you can, get some source of inspiration, some tips and tricks there. So if you are interested in joining, you can just check our bio and you'll get the link there. So moving on. Whether, you just talked about your mom and the support that you got from your family. So what are some specific resources or, support networks or educational materials that you were, able to find out or you found particularly helpful during your teenage time when you were managing type 1 diabetes?
Nothing at all. I'll be very honest with you. And as a teenager, I was very curious. So I would constantly go to YouTube and type out type 1 diabetes. And back in the day, all I could find were like these really long, boring lectures by doctors. Now, for a 13-year-old, that is not interesting at all. And actually, that was one of the reasons I started Diabesties. It was the lack of resources available in an engaging fashion for young people that made me want to start Diabesties in 2018. So, we in fact started with just being a YouTube channel to pass on information in an engaging way. So, unfortunately, I did not have any resources while growing up that I actually reached out to. Uh, However, I will say that my mom used to travel a lot, and once in 2000, maybe 10 or 11, she went to Boston and she heard about the Omnipod, which is the current pump I use, which was not available in India back then. So I just think because of that exposure, she got me accustomed or just even introduced to the Omnipod, which really changed my life. But when it comes to educational resources, which I think are so important in you understanding more about your condition, there was zero when I was growing up, in a way that I could understand, in a way that was fun and not like a 4 hour lecture, you know. So that's why I started Diabetes to create resources for other type 1s. So I kept thinking, you know, what would have I wanted when I was growing up? And for like another project that we have begun is something called Back to Basics, which is our one-on-one counseling support network, and we've helped over like 2,000 people with type 1 through that. Just like exactly all my entire team, we just keep going back to yaar jab hum diagnosed hue the, what were the things we didn't have, and we're trying to deliver that to the community today.
And like, do you have a team that also has the condition, or like, do you share like
All 50 members of
space?
my team are type 1,
Wow,
and
that's
we also
amazing.
have about 10 caregivers, so mothers and fathers of type 1, but all 50 members of my team have type 1 diabetes. And the rest are people who are caregivers, who are caring for people with type 1. Because I genuinely believe to actually make impact in this field, you require that lived experience. Because I think you have to understand what it's like before you can do pravachan. You know, I keep saying practice what you preach. This is like actually living with what you preach. So I think that provides empathy like nothing else can provide. So the entire team is with lived experience.
And that must be such a nice space to work in also. Like everybody can understand what the other person is going through. In our case, like with THIP Media, why
Yeah.
I can resonate with it is we are an all women's team. So we, yeah, so we understand in a similar way, we understand what the other person might be going through, what are the, you know what can be the health issues that they can be going through. That support is becomes very like natural when we have somebody with the same, condition or in the
No,
same way.
I totally agree. So, there'll be times when we're all on Slack and there's a team meeting, and suddenly, we're all on video, and one person will just be taking an injection, let's say, slyly in the corner. The other person is correcting a hypo, and no one's batting an eye about it, you know? No one's batting an eye. Injection. ले रही है. It's so normal for us that even in that one setting, it's so beautiful that, you're all taking care of yourself while we're trying to take care of others. So just that understanding of what we all go through. Somebody needs to take a day off because they've got like high sugars all through the night. Like nobody will even question it, because I think the one thing that everyone needs to understand is that people with type 1 diabetes don't like using their condition as an excuse. So this is actually also for other people who employ people with type 1, and they come to you and they say that, oh, sir, my sugars was really high, I've got a headache. हम excuse नहीं बना रहे. And the idea is that a lot of times it feels like you're using your condition as an excuse. And trust me, I can tell you, for the majority of us who are living with the condition, we never like using our excuse. So हम actually push करेंगे कि यार हम कब तक can we go on without, and this is a very bad habit I have. Like I'll be like, no, I don't care what sugar I have, I'm gonna show up, because it's also like what we're advocating for, right? That no, like type 1s can do anything. So when there's actual a medical reasoning, it's never an excuse.
And that is such a nice thing. Like kudos to that attitude and kudos to that perception also. So how were you able to navigate, social situations such as parties, gatherings, and while managing your condition well? And do you have any quick tips or strategies that people can also, look to when you recommend, which you can recommend to teenagers especially?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest thing I will say is don't be afraid. Because a personal story, when I was 14 or 15, I used to wear an insulin pump and I used to be very scared of going through airport security. So I would always, because in India we still do the hand frisking, right? So they would always look at the pump, and I've actually been told, "Ki, acha, you know, what is this? Is it a bomb?" and this and that. And it can really sort of give you a very traumatic experience that you're standing there, you're already vulnerable. So I think the idea is to advocate for yourself in all situations, social or otherwise. I used to be very scared as a child when I used to go through that. And then my dad told me once, like, are you doing something wrong? Are you taking something illegal with you? Like, again, normalizing it for you for then to be like, okay, yeah, I'm actually not doing anything wrong. I don't need to be scared of actually staying alive. Same with the parties and stuff. I think sometimes what happens is parents specifically, they're like, acha, party mein ja rahe ho, to go into a corner and inject. Don't inject in front of people. In school, go to the bathroom. Like that kind of stigma is what we need to get out. Like that should not even be an option. Like again, like I said, you're not doing anything illegal. So get that confidence to inject in a party when you're going out. If you want to have a piece of cake, go have a piece of cake. Take the correct amount of insulin after that. I think it's not about restricting things when you're type 1. It's about learning to adjust with all of the little vicissitudes. So, and I think simple tips, like very practical tips, are always keep your supplies on you. Like keep your insulin with you, keep your glucose testing meter with you, keep your hypo treats with you. Make sure that the people you are hanging out with know about your condition. So that when you're supposing hypo, like today, if I'm hypo, 20 people in my house will give me one juice, one this, one that, because they know now kya karna hai, right? So it also gives a lot of support. You don't have to take all the calls yourself. You have a support system that is doing it for you. So parties, sports days, I don't know what are the other social situations, traveling, everything is possible as long as you are prepared and as long as you are not afraid. So that would be my top two tips.
Absolutely amazing. I think really nice tips. Uh, and like how did your journey with type 1 diabetes, did your journey with type 1 diabetes shape your perspective on health and well-being? Like, was it always the same, or there was a shift in perception when you were able to diagnose your condition?
The shift in perspective definitely came when I was a little older to be able to really understand what it meant. But I don't think I would have had this much gratitude in my life if I didn't have the condition. Um, I think just understanding the fact that, like, I'll be very frank, and I'm not over dramatizing, but people with type 1 fight for their life. It's actually, if you go to this thing, thoda sa zyada insulin le liya, you could, get a very severe hypo. Kam insulin le liya, you could go very high. There are situations where you are actually fighting to stay alive. So that kind of so I think just simple things like living in the present. I think I've realized after I was diagnosed that you have to be present at all moments. You have to make the most of what you get. And the amount of gratitude I have, not only for my parents, for health, for healthy habits, for the healthcare system, but just for life. I think I'm so grateful to be able to just live life every day, and that would have not been there if I did not have type 1 diabetes.
That is such an amazing answer. You know, there are some questions also for you in the comment section, and a lot of people have written that you are a role model to them. So, kudos to you, and kudos to the work that you do, and kudos to the Diabetes Foundation. I mean, the type of videos that you make, we can vouch for, they're amazing.
Thank
And the work that you're doing is absolutely amazing. So, somebody has asked, can they do yoga in the condition?
Absolutely. I think you must. Any kind of physical exercise is recommended for people who have got type 1 diabetes because it increases your insulin sensitivity. So, whether it's yoga, dance, or whether it's gymming, or whether it's running, just know what kind of effect that exercise will have on your sugars. For example, if it's an aerobic exercise, you can tend to go low, but if it's an anaerobic, if you're doing HIIT or if you're doing weight training, your sugars can actually rise because of the release of adrenaline and cortisol and things like that. But as long as you're aware of what that can do to your body, it is recommended to exercise. twice a week, every day. And yoga is beautiful. It keeps your sugars very much in range. So please do it. Just don't do it as a substitute for insulin. That's my only advice.
And another question is, do you still take injections or put injections?
I use an insulin pump now. So for the longest time, for the first 4 or 5 years of my life, I use pens, but then I shifted onto an insulin pump. So abhi main pump pe hu.
Okay. And I don't know why, but a lot of people are asking, are you like cooking at home? Do you like cooking at
Do
home?
I personally do not cook, but I do eat ghar ka khana a lot. It's my favorite khana, ghar ka khana. But I can cook if that's the question. मुझे cooking आती है, हाँ बिल्कुल आती है. uh, I don't enjoy it too much, but if push comes to shove, I can make a very good paneer makhani.
Oh, yes, we love it. Another person says that can standing on one leg bring down sugar levels?
I wouldn't know. You can try and let me know. That would be very interesting. I don't think it directly has any impact on sugars, but please do try and test for yourself.
Yeah, if it's a yoga asana, then definitely you can try contacting the yoga instructor and let us know as well. Or maybe we can fact check it.
That's a good idea for you.
Somebody has asked, there can be a lot of hormonal changes among
Yes.
teenagers. How did you navigate through all that with type 1 diabetes?
I'll be very honest and very candid with you all. My sugars when I was growing up was anything but perfect. I had the worst fluctuation. Like I would be in the same day, I would be 40 and 400, you know. I'll tell you why. This is for multiple reasons. One, because yes, as adolescents we are generally hormonal, and that will always impact your sugars. During my teenage years, my insulin requirement was changing constantly. That's a reality that anyone living with type 1 will face in that adolescent phase. Rest assured, it will settle down once you finish puberty. But the second reason, which is probably the more important reason why my sugars were so uncontrolled, was because I had zero education about my condition. मुझे किसी ने कार्ब काउंटिंग नहीं सिखाया था. मैं एक फिक्स डोज रेजिमेंट पे थी. And we know that a fixed dose regimen is not the way. Like, we are far too along in science to be on a fixed dose regimen, you know. Nobody taught me about how climate can affect my sugars, how exercise can affect my sugars, how stress can affect my sugars. So I had zero knowledge. My parents had zero knowledge. We were navigating it on a day-to-day basis. I luckily had a doctor who I could call at any time. पर पता है मैं कॉल करके भी क्या पूछी थी कि डॉक मेरा शुगर 300 मैं कितना यूनिट लूं. And he would tell me, okay, just take 4 units or take 3 units. It was never that, okay, why is your sugar high? Have you counted your carbs? What is your insulin to carb ratio? What is your insulin sensitivity factor? Trust me, if I had known these things while growing up, I wouldn't have those A1Cs that I had in my childhood. So my sugars personally were very, I wouldn't say terrible because no sugars are terrible, but very uncontrolled during my adolescence because I did not know better. Hormonal changes हमको definitely रखना है in consideration, but including those hormonal changes, if you have the education, like the families that we consult in our B2Bs, their kids are thriving because they know how to. That's the reason.
And that is where your foundation also comes into picture. And when you're
Yes,
doing such a, good job, totally free of cost, and when you have communities where you can get the information, then people should definitely come and read more about
yeah,
it. And now we have, like now we are in an age where we have so many resources with us to look forward to and refer to. And
absolutely.
lives like these also are very helpful, that you can just write your question and you get an answer from somebody who's dealing or managing it. So that's
Totally.
amazing. Yeah. Somebody has asked, Tanya, what's your daily routine with food and activity?
So, because of the work I do, none of my 2 days are the same. But generally, I eat a very, very balanced diet. So, if you're interested in what I eat, मैं सब खाती हूँ. I'm not on a low carb diet at all, and a low carb diet is not something I recommend to any person with type 1. It is your choice, of course, but it is not the only way you can get a low A1C. My HbA1C is 5.9, a proper carb diet. The important thing is for it to be a balanced diet. So I very, very balanced diet. So every meal of mine has a huge amount of fiber. It has a lot of vegetables. It has some form of protein, chicken or dal or egg or whatever. Well, not egg. I'm allergic to egg, but anything else. And I also have some like buttermilk or dahi with it as well. तो मैं बहुत बैलेंस डाइट खाती हूँ. मैं ब्रेकफास्ट करती हूँ, मैं लंच खाती हूँ, मैं इवनिंग स्नैक खाती हूँ, मैं रात को खाती हूँ. And I take insulin for everything I eat. So even if I go and बीच में मेरे को एक chocolate का piece खाना है, I'll have it, but I'll take a small unit of insulin for it. So I work out almost every single day, some form of the other. I'm dancing or I'm doing some sort of a gym routine or walking. कुछ ना कुछ तो रहता है. And then between work, there are meetings, there are calls, there are emails, this, that, there are B2Bs that I'm taking, or I'm traveling for conferences. So that's my day-to-day routine, so to say.
Perfect. A very balanced one.
Very balanced. I try to be balanced.
Anandita has asked, which pump are you currently using or currently on?
So I am currently on the Omnipod. I'm on the Omnipod Dash. I'll also give this as a disclaimer that Omnipod is currently not available in India, but that's the current pump I am on. And the reason I chose that pump was because it's tubeless. So it doesn't have a tube. And when I was professionally dancing, I couldn't. You can very much dance also with that pump, but the way I used to dance professionally at that time, I preferred a tubeless pump just so that it wouldn't get that much in the way of rehearsal schedule. So that's the one I use.
You have answered this question, but I'll again ask, do you eat ice cream or sweets once a while?
More than once a while. I eat ice cream, eat 100% more than once a while. I just know how to calculate my insulin for it. तो मैं जरूर खाती हूँ, मॉडरेशन में खाती हूँ. ऐसा नहीं कि आइसक्रीम मतलब पूरा टब खा लो, छोटा सा खाने का. It's also about portion control, right? So I'll never have a whole chocolate bar, and I don't even like, मेरे को dark chocolate ज्यादा पसंद है. So I have a dark chocolate का छोटा टुकड़ा almost every night after my dinner. That's my sweet. But you can absolutely.
Perfect. I think that's the